if God wanted me to be fixed from being gay, then he could do anything. And I wanted to be fixed so desperately. How could God not have the power to do that? I met my first boyfriend and we dated when I was 18. We dated for about 3 months. I loved being with him and felt happy, and we shared a lot of interests, and he was an incredibly kind person. But I would leave his place and go home and then hate myself again. I didn't feel loved or cared in any other aspect of my life. And so I started to actually feel cared about in this relationship. But about 3 months into dating my first boyfriend, I went back to where I was mentally and with my faith, and I broke up with him. I told him that being gay is a sin and that I was going to try to be a better Christian and get cured and fixed, and that he should too. And it's one of the biggest regrets of my life. I dove deeper into church. I started taking seminary classes, and with the goal of going even deeper into faith. I did briefly ask a girl from the youth group at the Pentecostal church to go out with me, and we went out on a date. The idea that like you shouldn't kiss or hold hands or have sex before marriage is a great cover for somebody who didn't want to do any of those things with her. And the idea that I could pursue the path of dating this woman or another woman and marry her and have kids with her and then still end up hurting them. Even though I still hated myself, I didn't want to hurt somebody like that. And even though I didn't think being gay was okay, I knew that if I continued to date a woman, that I'd be living a lie. I went to my first Pride in Atlanta. I was 18 and I got out of the train station, and I remember coming out of the train station and there were protesters everywhere with their signs that say "God hates fags." And I remember ducking behind people because they were people from my parents' church, or the church I grew up in. And I knew that if they saw me, they would immediately find a way to tell my parents. But I stayed, I didn't leave. I just stayed away from the protesters. And in the parade is an organization every year called PFLAG, which is a LGBTQ support group for members of the community as well as their family and friends. And I remember seeing these parents carrying signs that say, "I love my lesbian daughter," or "I love my gay son." And I just stood there and cried because it was the first time since conversion therapy that I had felt like maybe I deserved to be loved, and that maybe some other parent would have loved me, or that maybe I should love myself. And it was a glimpse into the joy that I would later find in life, being surrounded by a queer family and people who loved me and accepted me for who I am. Meanwhile, my roommate at the time, my first roommate, I'm very grateful for the passive influence she had in my life, because she was more supportive of me without even knowing it than my family had ever been. She introduced me to the show Will and Grace, and we started watching that, and for the first time ever in my life, I saw a representation of a gay man on television or in a book or anywhere. It was my first time ever seeing that, and it became really integral into the way I looked at the world, and even my sense of humor at the time was really shaped by that show. And my roommate had no idea that she was introducing me to anything other than a silly sitcom that she enjoyed, but it really did provide me, again, kind of a weekly example of gay people existing. Starting to see more and more celebrities being openly queer was really powerful to me. When Ellen DeGeneres came out of the closet, I first heard, I didn't know who she was, we didn't watch TV in the cult, but I first heard about her from the pulpit of the church, where she was condemned as being a horrible sinner, and that she was leading children astray, and a lot of the same arguments that we hear now about queer people grooming people were being taught in this church, about how we were forcing homosexuality on children. But I started to question that. I started to not buy into that because Ellen just wanted to exist, and I identified so deeply with just wanting to exist in the world. I remember when the musical version of Kinky Boots came out on Broadway, and it's a show about drag queens and boots and performances and stuff, and it starred Billy Porter as the lead drag queen. They performed a medley of some of the songs in the Thanksgiving parade in New York, and it was the first time drag queens had ever been in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. And people were outraged. People in my mom's church were outraged. My relatives were outraged. This is a family-friendly event, and there was nothing sexual about what was going on. It was a Broadway musical where drag queens were in the play. And I remember the next day, Billy Porter and the other star of the show went on and they talked about how being gay or queer or trans isn't anti-family. We are your family. We're your brothers and your sisters and your children, and we deserve to exist in the world just as much as everybody else. And if that's with glitter and wigs and makeup, that's great, but it doesn't have to be. We're still there, and we're always going to be there. Drag was, even within the gay community, really looked down on. So many drag queens felt like no one would love them. That drag queens had a hard time getting dates, or especially if they were trans in their everyday life, and then also drag performers, they were outcast within the gay community. These are people whose gender identity and their gender expression and their performance characters are loud and out there, and they go in the middle of the day on a pride parade on a float shooting glitter cannons, so they're not afraid to show up in a really real way. And at this point in time in my life, my being gay was really quiet. It was still in the privacy of my bedroom. I had that culturally acceptable homosexuality where whatever you do in your bedroom can just stay there. I'm not a drag queen. That seems like way too much work. But what I do love about it is just that boldness to really truly be so visibly not fitting into the mold that society has told us we need to fit into. These ideas of masculinity and femininity, what I now realize are deeply rooted in misogyny, and the idea that masculinity is strong and better, and any kind of femininity in society in general is weakness or a flaw, and that women are less than men, essentially. I remember meeting and befriending my first trans friend, and I just couldn't believe how brave she is. She's undergone so much more trauma than I'll ever experience in very different ways. But we connected really deeply because she didn't have a relationship with her family at a similar time when I didn't have a relationship with my family. But she walked into the world being herself, not fitting in the gender role that was assigned her at birth and by her family and by her faith. And here I was still fighting to make sure I looked as masculine as possible and being afraid that my voice sounded too lispy. Every time I had a new relationship with a boyfriend or made friends with a drag queen, I found an aspect of myself through those relationships that helped me understand myself more and like myself more. And now I really want to push myself to just do what makes me happy. If wearing nail polish makes me happy, or glitter or whatever, why not? And why spend time and more of my life wasting by what society views as valuable? I don't want to waste my life hating myself anymore, and I don't want to waste my life being unhappy for other people.